got to know when to hold up, know when to fold up, know when to walk away, and know when to run. You never count your money. When you're sitting at the table, there'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done.
Any way you look at it, today's farmer is a gambler. He's got to gamble on the weather to get a crop before he can ever begin to gamble on the price he might get for it. To stay ahead of the game, the guy still in farming today has had to take a few chances. This story is for those of you who think no-till farming is risky business. It's about Dean and Lyle McCunn, who farm near Red Oak in southwest Iowa. In 1980, the McCunn brothers switched all but 30 of their 400 acres of corn and beans to no-till. Their land is rolling with up to 10% slope on marshal soils, typical of Montgomery County. Dean says originally they didn't really intend to plant the whole farm with no-till.
We were in the process of buying a new planter. We'd been reading about no-till, and so we kicked around the idea of buying a planter that was engineered to plant no-till and conventional, so we could try a few acres of no-till if we wanted to. We bought this John Deere 7000 conservation planter. After we bought the planter in December, we did a lot of driving, a lot of reading, and an awful lot of listening to fellows that had been in no-till and made it work. We came home and put it all together and decided to go all no-till. Our banker wasn't as concerned as you might think, because our planter would go either way. He looked at our no-till this summer, and I think he was impressed. We really didn't think it was such a big gamble. Some people try it on 10 or 15 acres, but we felt if we could make it work on 40 acres, we could make it work on 400. We convinced ourselves that it was going to work. We were going to do what it took to make it work. I'll say this, I don't think Lyle and I did anything last year that any farmer couldn't do. It's not that difficult. I think you've got to put yourself into the position that you're going to make it work. When everyone in the county found out we were going all no-till, we knew damn well we had to make it work. Really, though, we did our homework. We went to a conference in Ottumwa, and every bulletin we could pick up, every article we could read, we did. Any meeting on it, we tried to go. That's what someone going into no-till ought to do. Not that I think we're experts after just 1 year. If we were surprised about anything the first year, it's at how well everything turned out for being so new at it.
The McCunns ran yield checks on their corn and beans, and the corn was about 150 bushels per acre, the second best yield Dean says he's ever had. Soybeans averaged 42 bushels an acre. Here's their system for those yields.
We went into no-till with the idea to do as little stirring of the soil as possible. We felt like every time you turned the soil, you were going to start a fresh crop of weeds, and you'd loosen the soil for erosion. That's the theory we went on. It's a little tough to let your fields alone in the spring while the neighbors go into the fields. I've had a few people ask if it wouldn't be all right to run a disc over the field before no-till, but I think it's a mistake. You just stir up weeds and you might as well go fishing. I've never put in this many acres of row crop so easily. We had a little of everything. We had corn on corn, corn on beans, and corn in sod ground. We also had beans on beans and beans on corn stubble. We chopped some of the stalks because they were tough and giving us some planting problems. Then we harrowed some, which is faster and I think better than chopping. But you scatter any ears of corn in the field, chopping or harrowing, so it's really better if you don't do anything before planting. That is, anything but spraying. We put on 2 quarts of lasso, 2 quarts of Bladex, and a pint of paraquat, plus a wetting agent, where we were going to plant corn. To get good chemical coverage, we put on 50 gallons of water an acre with 50 pounds of pressure. We used the flat fan spray nozzles. We did the same thing for soybeans, except substituted a pint of Sencor for the Bladex. On the alfalfa sod ground, we used a pint of 2,4-D 3 days ahead of the paraquat and other herbicides, just like we'd been told. and the 2,4-D was important to kill the alfalfa sod. The emphasis you hear on the sprayer being a good one and getting good coverage is true. We revamped our sprayer to get a 500-gallon tank and added a hydraulic boom lift to maintain proper boom height. Lyle also rigged up this garbage can so we could do all our mixing on the ground. Makes it a lot easier. You hear talk about needing extra chemicals with no-till, but the paraquat at about $5 an acre is the only extra we put on over what we would have with our plowing or chisel systems of the past. The only insecticide we used was Lorsban on the alfalfa and second-year corn. One thing we learned at meetings, and it proved out to be right, is that you plant your crop and then you start walking. You check for problems. Of course, you do that with any system. Post-emergence herbicides have improved. We have a problem with yellow nutsedge here, so we took care of it. And not too long afterwards, it looked like this. Overall, we didn't have a serious weed problem on our farm before starting no-till, and I think that made it easier. We studied a lot of herbicides, though, and knew ahead of time what we'd use if we had problems. We only cultivated about 95 acres of beans, no corn. We tried using our regular cultivator, but couldn't make it work on 30-inch rows. We got a buffalo cultivator, and it worked great. Lyle does the combining, and he couldn't get over how clean the fields were. We were concerned about whether the herbicides put on top of all the corn stalks would work, but they did. You get a funny feeling pulling in to plant a field where you can hardly see the ground. You worry about stands too, but Lyle and I had good stands on all of our land. You can have a lot of trash and still get a good stand. I am also convinced now that no-till gives you the best stands on thin spots where erosion has been a problem. That's because tearing up those clay hillsides leaves a cloddy seedbed. No-till worked below our terraces that were built with soil pushed up from the bottom side where the soil was thin. From the crops we got this year, I'm going all no-till again next year. You see it on your own farm and you know it'll work. These were heavy residues. But the beans came up through. They grew well, and it was a nice-looking field, and they produced. Before I stop, I want to mention one of the main reasons we went to no-till. Economics and crop yields weighed heavily, but we made up our mind that even if we took a little less yield, we'd still be ahead of the game. I'll tell you why. In the fall of '78, we chiseled nearly every acre we had. In the spring of '79, we got a 4-inch rain. I lost more dirt that spring on this farm than I had since I'd owned it. It filled the terraces, cut over terraces, and cut rills as deep as it was chiseled. That happened to neighbors within a mile of me this last spring, but not on the no-till ground. On these steeper slopes with any length at all, you still need terraces and no-till for protection with continuous row crop. There's no comparison between the chisel and the disc system and the no-till system as far as soil conservation is concerned. And there's no comparison on the work and the time to put the crop in either.
Another Montgomery County farmer, Bob Servine, agrees. You might be interested in some of his thoughts after 1 year of no-till, too. Bob's beautiful farm is completely terraced. No one has a farm more protected with terraces, but Bob says that's not enough. A soil conservation commissioner in Montgomery County for 10 years, he says he had soil washing into his terrace channels after heavy rains in the spring. But on the no-till acres, he didn't have the problem. Still, he says he wasn't ready to switch all the way over to no-till.
It's up to the individual on how fast they might want to switch over, but I'm kind of from Missouri and I like to see for myself how things will compare. So I used it on about 76 acres of the 450 acres of land that I farm.
Bob tried a no-till strip between every other terrace to compare results with the chisel and disc system he was using. He says the chisel system didn't give him the best seed bed in this field last year. Yields were so close he couldn't tell any difference, he said, although most of the checks showed no-till to be slightly better. He says he'll go with no-till on 3/4 of his ground next year and use the 1/4 as a check system. One thing he says he'll change is the spraying.
I had the ground custom sprayed last year, but I think I'll buy my own sprayer for next year, as I think spraying will work better between the terraces.
In his case, the switch to no-till was easy and inexpensive. He has a John Deere 7000 planter, and all he did was get the Coulter kit for each row. He says it was easy to put on and cost about $110 a row. He also put 3 100-pound tractor weights over each row to make sure the planter was getting into the ground. His system was basically the same as the McCunn brothers, except he used anhydrous ammonia. All three were pleasantly surprised with no-till on their first year. From their experience, it appears that no-till is like anything else you do that's different. First, you've got to convince yourself it will work. Then you've got to find out all you can about it and do your best to make it work. Farmers all over Iowa are finding no-till has several pluses. Matter of fact, one southern Iowa farmer said he's tried his darndest, but just can't find anything wrong with it. No-till might be just the ticket for farming in the 80s.